Hello, everybody, again. So this is the fourth session for day 2 of TMF Week 2025. So we've had a lot of discussion already this morning around standards, and we're going to continue on that discussion with a great panel discussion today. Before we get started, I'd just like to do some housekeeping. So Kim, okay. So this session will be recorded and available at the end of the conference. So if you want to share the insights that you gain from today's panel discussion with any of your colleagues, feel free to share the link. Anybody who's registered and attends a session at TMF Week gets a certificate of attendance, and it's for the whole week. Not just for one session. We will be answering questions. We'll be taking questions. So please enter your questions in the Q&A panel on your screen. And if we see a question that's pertinent to the discussion, we'll bring it in. If not, we may address it at the end of the session as well. And at the end of our panel today, there will be a networking break. So head over to the lounge if you want to mingle or discuss with any of your colleagues around some of the themes and subjects that you've heard during today's panel discussion. So we'll start our panel by introducing our panelists. So today's panel is being run by Donna Dorozinski, who is the CEO of Just-in-Time GCP, and also the leader of the CDISC TMF Reference Model V4 management team. So Donna plays a key role in the V4 initiative. We're also joined by Liz Farrell from Agios. Liz is also a member of the triage committee, so is also very involved in V4, and Steph Viscomi from Apellis, who again is a triage committee member. And then of course myself. So with that, I will pass it over to Donna so that we can start to talk about V4 and the impact of V4 on the reference model.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you to everyone who joined us today, and certainly to my esteemed panel, Paul, Steph, and Liz. I'm really excited to kind of get started with the discussion. Many of you who have attended or attending today might have had the opportunity to attend the CDISC meeting last week and hear a little bit about what's ahead of us for V4. So I wanted to start today with kind of just a generic question of what are the things that we can definitely expect to see as part of V4. We're almost 6 months in, and I know we've got some real good decisions out there. So I'm just going to turn it over to the group, and maybe we'll start with you, Liz. What are some things we're definitely planning on seeing?
Sure. So a couple of those key decisions that it was very exciting. We were able to announce in Geneva at the CDISC conference, but really one that's going to be a bit of a change in vocabulary is the transition from the terms artifact and subartifact to record group and record type. So no longer, once we are in version 4, will we be using the term artifact. That will transition over to a record group. And similarly, instead of sub-artifact, we will be focusing on record types. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that, with the updated R3 guidance, there was a big transition from the Word document, and really artifact and subartifact was so unique to the reference model anyway. We're really trying to standardize and align to the language and the vocabulary that's being used across the industry and embracing that term record. And it's just more equivalent to how we're dealing with data and documents and all of the things that compose the TMF. We're really looking at them as those records now. So that's a paradigm shift, I think, that a lot of people will have to get used to, but we certainly have runway and time to practice that in our day-to-day efforts. So I encourage all of you to try to start using those terms to familiarize yourself with them. And then the other decision, I guess, that we've made on V4 is to have metadata standards and to implement some standardization and consistency on the metadata that we're using and applying and the formats that we're using and applying to all of the various record types in the systems that we're using, but also just in our own terminology. We're embracing the controlled vocabularies of CDISC and trying to ensure we're all speaking the same language, not just in intent, but in actual words. Really just embracing that standardization that CDISC helps us bring forward. So those are the two that I think are most useful or most exciting, I guess.
That's awesome, Liz. Paul, how about you? What's exciting you about the decisions we've made so far?
I'm a techie guy, right? So I like the techie stuff. But I think one decision that we made, which is very important, is the decision around UID and numbering. So as you know, throughout each of the different versions of the reference model that we've had so far, we've had the artifact number, which is typically a 6-digit number. So it's grouped 2 by 2 by 2 for process and section and then artifact. So that's your 010101 trial master file plan. And then we have a 3-digit UID, which was a unique identifier that never changed and was also always associated to an artifact. So even if we moved an artifact, say from one process zone to another, it would always retain that unique identifier, that UID. And that was really important for traceability, for migrations and things like that. Now, obviously, we're moving to record types, and we're going to have a lot more record types. There's going to be a significant number. And we've decided that we're no longer going to have the unique ID, so the 3-digit unique ID on the artifact or record group in the future, but we are going to maintain a unique ID for the record types. And because there are so many potential record types in the future, we're going to have a digit of 5 digits instead of 3. But the important thing to sort of keep in mind with this is that unique identifier will never change for a record type and will never be reissued even if we withdraw a record type. And that unique ID from a system standpoint, from a technology standpoint, will ensure traceability and will make it a lot easier for us to be able to migrate from one system to another or from one version of the reference model standard to another. So it's a really important piece of information. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we are defining conventions around that so that you can truly understand how to use it, how it works, how we come up with the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is we're not getting rid of that 6-digit, what we call system number or artifact number. We're still keeping it, but it will be associated to the record group. So you'll still be able to refer to 010101 and probably land in the same place. So that I think is an important consideration as we start to get more granular.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. And Steph, kind of thinking about the decisions, are you looking forward to?
Well, I think I have the best news of all. And I'm hoping I'm going to see a lot of emojis of celebration and some of the things I'm about to say. So hurrah, we get to keep the Excel spreadsheet for our reference model. So high five, very exciting. I think that's a little bit of, that's exciting because it still keeps the old in transition with the new, and, change is hard. And I think having that making that decision was a big deal. So really excited. I see a lot of the already starting to come through. So that's really exciting news. And I think the second piece really for me speaks to the effort that is going into this across our niche industry. We have SMEs from sponsors and CROs and vendors, and really coming together and providing their feedback. And one of the biggest feedback that we have coming thus far as well is that we are keeping that trial, country, and site levels in there. So we're able to, and that was something that came from our vendors. That was an ask. So I think it's really important that we maintain those as well. So excited for that. We have a lot going on.
Awesome. These all sound like great changes. And as we think about, the whole motivator behind V4 was moving into this digital era. So one of the ways we've described V4 is kind of like moving forward to digital maturity, right? And Paul, this is really for you. How do you see aligning this with that broader digital transformation that's actually happening in clinical trials? Because it's not isolated to the TMF. It's really across the industry. So how do you see this aligning, and where do you see the biggest opportunities to impact?
Yeah, so we're right now in the middle of this kind of transformation when it comes to clinical information and clinical records. We're about to see the birth of ICH M11, which is the guidance and standard from ICH for digital protocol. And I think that that's the first of many digital record standards that we're going to see in the future. And so that it just in itself is very exciting, because it means that all of a sudden we can start to read a protocol that's in data format. So it has metadata fields, it has information that's digitized so that we can actually query it and understand it and then take action on that information. So all of a sudden we're going to be able to look at a digital protocol and understand, okay, well, how many different committees do I have, and how many treatment arms are there? Is this randomized, and if so, how is it being randomized? And all these different factors that have an impact on the way that we configure our trial master file and the way that we actually tell the story of the study. Now, the digital protocol and ICH M11 is being integrated into USDM, which is a standard that's been developed by CDISC called the Unified Study Definitions Model, which encapsulates all of the protocol information and then some. And this standard is being used by all of the other clinical systems to be able to read the protocol information, but also read other information about the study and eventually achieve interoperability between each of these different systems. And for us, this is really important because the TMF is very, very dependent on all of these other systems. They all contain TMF relevant information. And so if we can start to speak the same language of these systems by using the same standards like USDM, then all of a sudden it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to interoperate with those systems and access information that's contained within those systems and understand that information, because it's all codified using the same control terminology, and it's organized in the same way. And so that is really it's a key differentiator for us, because all of a sudden we're no longer having to copy records and create PDFs and then upload them, or create these placeholders and then try and scramble and find the record in the relevant system. All of a sudden things start to get connected. And so this is something that I think we've been waiting for a very long time as an industry. And it seems like it's finally coming to fruition, which I think is a game changer. And then I think finally, the digital protocol, as I said, is super important, because all of a sudden we're also going to be able to start to navigate our TMF by digital protocol. So we're going to be able to start creating associations between our record types that we formalize in version 4 and the different sections and subsection and areas of the digital protocol. So if I'm looking at the digital protocol and I'm looking at the randomization section, well, all of a sudden I'm going to be able to start to see records that relate to randomization because we've made that connection. So that's also an important aspect of this. And then one last aspect, and you can see that there are lots of different aspects, is the information that's contained within the digital protocol and other systems will enable us to improve our completeness, because we can act on the information that we're receiving in this very sort of structured way to predict which records we should expect to see within our trial master file. So in the future, hopefully, the days of trying to compile your expected document list and trying to keep that up to date and sort of trying to work out what's going on in the study, hopefully those days will be behind us, and we'll actually have our expected record list being generated automatically based on events that are occurring in the study, or based on study design parameters that are contained within the digital protocol. So I think that's the future. That's what's in front of us, and that's why it's so important that the TMF reference model becomes a digital TMF standard to be able to be part of that bigger picture. That was a long answer.
That was a long answer to a short question there, Paul. I thought I had the corner on that. I think it was really helpful. And I think I've heard you answer that question 100 times, but I liked how you connected M11 so deeply to the TMF. You know, we're now part of CDISC as a reference model. And so it's really important to think about the impact of V4 that we align with that data-driven world, right? But so many people on the call today, or on the webinar today, are also thinking about, well, how does that impact my processes? Because as an industry, we tend to be a little bit more process-driven. So we know that one of the goals of V4 is to create a more modular and process-oriented approach. So as we think about it in terms of record groups and record types, which Liz told us about at the very beginning, how do you think, and I'll just direct this at Liz to start with, how do you think this is going to impact how organizations actually think about TMF oversight and owning the TMF? Because it's kind of almost like a full circle story now.
Exactly. I think what we're going to see, and I can't predict the future, so I don't want to promise anything prematurely or say, you know, anything about exactly what we will end up with. But I think the concept of moving towards those record groups is going to help us align the processes that we are conducting under the protocol, under the parameters of the protocol, to where we find the types of records we're looking for. So we keep that idea of structure and we keep that idea of navigability that we've all become very used to and comfortable with, while helping us create a more aligned, I guess, way of thinking of how we're executing our processes and the output of those processes. I think right now what we have noticed is as we've been reviewing the current version, is that we are a little inconsistent with how we use artifacts. Sometimes it is just a very specific single, what now will be a record type. And in other cases, it's a very broad description of the type of content that you could find there. So I think us moving into leveraging these terms and helping us align more to what those processes are will maintain that familiarity. It will help us continue to use the reference model in a way that we can sustain, and we don't have to completely break the chains of how we're used to working, but it will help us look at the processes in a more, in a way that is more descriptive of the execution of what we're doing and the associated output. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add there, but that's my take on it.
Steph, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
You know, not much. Liz said that wonderfully. And I mean, wholeheartedly, I have the word just kind of written in my notes of prior to discussing this panel, is a lot of it is alignment. And it really, telling the story of the TMF has been the name of our game since day one. And versus being more of, I mean, we've built our niche part of this industry with a lot of great efforts, and some of them patchwork and some of them involvement, but this will bring it all together. And I think in a better way, an easier way, tell the story of our TMF, tell the story of that study, going back to that digital protocol. So alignment is key. And it's not just a little alignment here and a little alignment there. This is going to be an overhaul of alignment across everything to make that data flow, those records flow together, tell that beautiful story.
Yeah, I think just to kind of summarize it all together, the goal of V4 is to be transformational, but try not to lose the things that we really rely on to do our job, right? So we've moved from record type to, or we've moved from artifact and subartifact to record group and record type. We're including the record types, which used to be the subartifacts, as part of the standard. We're trying to incorporate all the needs of M11. We had a really, I think, a great question come in. So I'm gonna read the question and then you all can decide who wants to go first. But the question that came in was, is V4 designed to be more adaptable to future regulatory shifts, decentralized trials, real world data integrating? So who wants to start?
I mean, I'm happy to start. So yes, absolutely. one of our sort of objectives as a group is to be very much comprehensive around various different types of trials and studies, and ensure that we're able to encapsulate everything. And so our goal is to to bring in sort of, obviously the ISF, the real world evidence or non-interventional study ancillary models, as well as do more work on the medical device side of things as well, so that we can also cover those completely. And so our goal is really to incorporate everything. We haven't yet put in place a group around decentralized clinical trials, but it's funny you mention it, because it's already come up once this week and last week as well. And so I'm thinking that more and more we're probably going to have to start to think about putting a working group on that as well. But the goal is definitely to be very comprehensive, but also to have a very integrated model, because obviously all of these different trial types have commonalities. And of course, there's a lot of commonality as well with the ISF and the sponsor TMF. And so we do need to make sure that they're properly integrated.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Paul, in that one of our goals with V4 is to really broaden our reach and kind of bring everything together into one central standard, V4, the reference model. And so as a result, we've actually thought about all the different regulations that have become active recently. ICHE 6R3, we have an actual working group around that. We have a working group around EUCTR. And all of that comes out of the triage committee. So the triage committee is a group of industry SMEs that is kind of just like it sounds. That's where all of the recommendations for change, or even the ideas that come out, they go to the triage committee. And Liz and Steph, you both sit on the triage committee. So I was wondering if you could speak to, if the two of you could actually speak to, what are some of the challenges that you guys are actually talking about at these meetings, right? You meet weekly. The people that are involved are really dedicating a lot of time and energy to trying to represent what industry is looking for and what we need as we have this vision for, the future. But what are some of the things that you've been talking about and that you're working to have V4 address?
So I'll start off. So I think one of the main challenges, I think it's even representative in the type of feedback that we've gotten. It can range from something very, very specific and oriented to a unique subartifact or a unique piece of the reference model, all the way to something fundamentally different about the structure of the index altogether. So I think the one main challenge that I see we're trying to tackle is how to tighten up the areas of the reference model that currently leave a lot of interpretation or opportunity for interpretation or various types of use. A really good example is even around CVs, where that seems like a very straightforward type of document, or record, excuse me, I'll put it in a nice swear jar. Whether you're coming from a sponsor or a CRO side, very often there's a huge amount of discord between whether you're using zone 1, the CV area in zone 1 versus zone 9, and it can just be a difference based on perspective. Neither organization or either perspective is wrong. It's just that's how you would interpret it based on the framework and framing of how you're using and looking at the reference model. So I think one of the big challenge areas that we're trying to address and hoping we can really make some fundamental differences is in those areas where there's opportunity for difference of perspective, difference of use, difference of opinion. And by cleaning those areas up, we'll be able to enhance that interoperability. We'll be able to enhance all of those things that we're trying to achieve here by not having variability organization to organization in how we're labeling things, using them, naming them, where we're putting them in the overall structure. I think a lot of these spaces we're stumbling upon, it's like there's 6 different right answers. None of them are wrong. We could really make a decision to put the final place, any one of these areas. But what we're trying to do is say this is the right one and give enough instruction and give enough context behind why it should go here. Hopefully it makes sense to the majority of folks. I don't think every decision is going to be everyone's favorite decision, but at the end of the day, if we're all using the same definition, the same structure, the same standard, it's going to be in the long run a much better model for us to use.
Steph, thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm over here smiling because, and kind of struggling a little bit, Liz pointed out I was part of the discussion yesterday, and it was so interesting hearing the different perspectives. So it is great to hear it, but it's also very challenging to navigate through because you have people coming from all sizes of companies, all different types of companies. It's an amazing team. It truly is. and people, very, very passionate TMF people, which we all are, but someone may not align with the other one, and just trying to say, not who's is better, as Liz said, but what is the most effective. And I think, Liz, you mentioned this earlier, we are still 2 years out. We don't know what the future is still going to hold in 2 years and beyond. So what are we talking about today that will apply then as well? So there are many different things. I mean, Liz, you talked about CVs. I think we also talked about plans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, plans go in one section, all in one section. Do we apply that at different, do they different levels for different. So it was just, what can a system do? What can it not do? There are so many, and it just stems from one little question. I believe we had like a 30, 45-minute conversation. But to tear it apart so much, I think is so valuable, such a valuable effort that enables us to say, okay, we really did our research. And I think a big part of that, and also going back to what Liz stated earlier, is some of the feedback that's coming through from folks that aren't sitting on the triage committee, just from our everyday users, contributors, part of our TMF space, whatever it may be, has been also very interesting as a part of an organization. Be like, I mean, do you understand what they're saying? And some person are like, yes, I do. Let me walk you through. So I guess there's always, for us, some educational opportunities as well. So very excited. There are challenges and there are definite benefits of being part of this committee.
So I thought of two things, and I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, Paul. You guys spent 30 minutes to 45 minutes talking about CVs yesterday. Paul and Lisa and Jill and I probably spent an hour talking about that very same thing before it came to you. I think the takeaway from that is a whole lot of thought is going into this, because I think we understand the responsibility of creating something that we're looking to have industry adopt as standard, right? What does it mean to be a standard? And I think there's a great question here that came in at 12:21. So just helping Kim throw that up on the screen if she would. But it's about standardization. And so when we become a standard, we're actually, kind of putting all together everything that everybody said so far. We're looking to move into a digital era. And so in order to move information from one organization to another, we need to create standards. And so this question I thought was a great question. And Paul, I'll ask you to take it. With formalization of subartifacts into record types in V4, will companies still have the ability to customize based on business needs?
And the short answer is yes, absolutely. So even though the reference model is becoming a formal standard, and subartifacts to be known as record types will be formalized, we will be issuing an implementation guide which will explain to you how you can go about creating your own custom record types. Because we realize that there may be very, very specific study designs that are just not covered by the list of record types that we've identified as a group, and so we will be giving you the tools, if you like, to be able to create your own record types, and those record types will be identified by a specific unique identifier beginning with 9. So if we see that there's a record type that has a UID beginning with 9, we know straight away that that's a custom record type. We're not going to find it in the reference model, but it will be formulated in such a way that it's consistent with what everybody else is doing. Now, if we start to see a record type that is systematically showing up as a custom across the board, then we'll probably start to integrate it into the model itself. And I think that with everything that we're doing in terms of the structure and the organization and the tools that we're going to be putting in place, and the conventions that we're defining as well, we will be able to expand the reference model quite significantly from what it is today. So over time, I would expect the record types to grow, the number of record types to grow.
Yeah, and Paul, to add on to that, I think you alluded to it earlier as well. Part of what we're doing on the triage committee is looking at what record types do we already know we're missing from there. So we know we're in a place of deficit at the moment in terms of our model. So we certainly will see an expansion of record types and really, again, some clarification of the ones that are ambiguous, but we'll be adding on to that. So we're hoping, we can't anticipate everything, as Paul said, unique study designs or even new regulation that we can't anticipate today that will come along may force us to create new record types that don't exist today. But we are doing our best to make sure that we are bringing in those missing pieces that exist in the model today to add those into the model. So hopefully each organization will at least start from a place of needing very little additional customization.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's certainly the goal. We had a question come in. I'm going to ask my question first that I have about like how we can start to prepare. And then I'm going to throw this other question up because I think it's a nice follow on to it. So with a targeted release of for sometime first quarter 2027, what can organizations start to do now to prepare to this pretty big shift that we're expecting to see with V4? So I don't know who wants to start.
I'd love to start. I mean, we're here today, right? Attend as many sessions as you can. Ask the questions. Even if you think it's already been answered, if you think it's silly, ask the questions. Because one, that'll help you prepare, and two, it'll help us know what we need to be educating as a committee, as an organization, out to get you all ready. Secondarily, and I think, Liz, you said it earlier, you said documents, you quickly went to records, put it in the swear jar, documents into the swear jar. Shift your mentality of how you speak as we're changing over some of these terminologies, and help your organization start to shift too. I know I've already started to do it within mine a little bit, and trust me, I do it myself. I said documents earlier today, I'm like, records. And it's ingrained enough, right? And it's ingrained in some of us who've been around for many, many years doing this. But once we start building that shift and educating ourselves and then being train the trainers, attend these sessions to be a train the trainer, and then train your companies little by little. And maybe it's your teams, maybe it's your stakeholders as we transition. And I think if you continuously to do that, once we get out 2 years out, it will be a lot smoother. And as we grow into this, we're just going to be educating you all on what we're coming up with. So quite easy.
I think I add on. Sorry, Liz. Yeah, I'll be ladies first.
Oh, I was just going to say I couldn't echo Steph's answer more, but certainly reinforcing the presence at as many different forums as you can be at. I know it's difficult sometimes to be able to attend conferences or all of the conferences, but finding within your network, sharing the information that you find, even if you can't personally attend, and bringing that back to your organization, being that champion for these changes within your company allows you to kind of have to minimize your footprint, definitely financially for your organization if you can't always navigate getting budget to attend everything, but finding the ones that are free, which is always great, and being able to participate, but also, taking whatever learnings you can get and finding where those learnings and those materials are available to bring whatever information is coming down the pike, in as real time as possible. I think we mentioned before, we're still in the midst of so many decisions for what V4 will bring us. So the information is going to trickle out constantly, and there's going to be new updates that we're going to do our best as a steering committee, as a triage committee, to communicate out to you all, but you've got to take that and bring it to your organization and champion it.
Yeah. I'd like to add that the other thing I think you should also be doing is speaking with your vendors. The vendors are an important part of this, and there is a sub-team that was put together and that's very active, with pretty much all of the main vendors involved and represented. And there's lots of active dialogue going on among the vendors and also with the vendors and the SME group. So they are definitely aware, and they're also, I think, excited to start working on these concepts. And I think it's important that you talk to them about what they're planning, so that you can kind of get a clear picture in your mind. And then I think the other thing, as we get a little bit further down the road, is start to think about, well, what's your implementation plan? What's your migration plan? How do I get to this? What are the kinds of things I'm going to need to do? And then also, what's my policy? Am I going to apply this to just new studies moving forward? Am I going to have a pilot study? Have a plan. Start to work on your plan. And then as we as a community start to make decisions and communicate those decisions. And as things evolve, and there's going to be a lot of communication, you can start to adjust your plan. So by the time you get towards mid 2026, you've got a pretty clear idea as to how you're going to move forward with this thing, and so does your organization and your teams. That's one thing I would recommend.
That's a good
Two more. Number one, become a volunteer. You'll get a lot of information. Attend the general, attend the reference model or general meetings that happen. There's a lot of information there. And last but not least, ping anybody on LinkedIn. Ping any of us. We love to answer questions. Obviously we all love to chat. But ask us. We're always happy to ask. I definitely know I've reached out in my TMF world, and if I needed some guidance or at least some validation on something, we're happy to help. Yeah,
for sure, Steph. We have a question that came into 1222 that I just it's a nice tag-on question, and I think it's a question worth just addressing. And it's my company eTMF structure is based on TMF Reference Model version 3. What do you see as the biggest challenges with implementing the reference model V4 with the number of ongoing trials being managed in the system? So I think this is a great question. This is kind of like a follow-on to what you said, Paul. Begin thinking about this. But going from V3 is pretty different to, there's several changes that happened along the way. So what are just a tip or two for the
my immediate thought is you need to kind of weigh up cost benefit. If you have a study that's running on version 3 and you're getting pretty close to the end of that study, is it worth migrating it? Maybe if it's sort of a pivotal study or a study that's going to be used later on for an inspection or to support a marketing application, possibly. But I think you need to kind of do that cost benefit analysis and sort of come up with some criteria as to when you would migrate versus when you wouldn't. And then the other thing is obviously you need to speak to your vendor who's providing the eTMF solution and ask them, well, how's it going to work? Can I have sort of 2 different versions that cohabit together, or do I have to move everything in your vision? So that's why you should be having dialogue with them now to sort of understand what their game plan is as well, so that you can work that into your strategy.
Awesome. I think those are helpful tips. And I think it's kind of a nice lead in to another question I have is, what role should change management and training play in ensuring successful transition to the new model? I think it's an industry responsibility, it's an organizational responsibility, but could each of you just speak briefly on that? Do you want to start, Steph?
Yeah, love to. It plays a huge role. And right now we are in the middle of change management, right? We are here talking about it. And I think we've already gone through a little bit a few months back of getting stakeholder feedback. So that's part of change management. We want to hear from you. And I'm going to tell you right now, even though that was a few months back, if you have feedback, keep sending it in. It is so vitally important. So it's a huge, we're part of it. We're moving on. The change management piece throughout our organizations and our industry alone, aligning those together. It takes time, it takes education, and it takes us as individuals and leaders and contributors even to roll this out little by little, and then at the end having that big push, which will take a little bit of time, but I think by then we'll be very well versed with all of this information that's coming out.
Yeah, agreed. And I think no matter what, the change that we're going to introduce as part of this, it's going to impact all parts of your organization. So you very well may sit in a TMF specific type role or a clinical operations role, and it might, all the changes that we'll roll out might make a lot of sense to you, and you might be able to digest those materials. But again, I think there's going to be a huge impact in how other functions that might only touch the TMF a smaller volume amount, I guess, or may just be a little more resistant to wanting to learn more or wanting to have to understand a new concept. So understanding, and once we've rolled those changes out, and once you have even the first trickles of information for areas that we're going to see differences in, reaching out to those parts of your organization that you think might be a little more challenged to understand the why behind the change, to understand the how it impacts me behind the change, and even just making them aware that it's coming, because they might not be as tuned into some of the forums that we're all used to. I think that's a piece that you can start doing in your organization now, answering a little bit, Donna, of the question you were asking before, but also that will really make the transition a success and the implementation, once it comes, a success within your organization. Because if you're starting from a place of complete ignorance of the change on day one, you're going to have a much higher hill to climb now that you're trying to implement materials. So laying that groundwork now is just that initial part of your change management that I think is going to be worth its weight in gold.
Exactly. Paul, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've been sort of sitting and listening to what Steph and Liz are saying, totally on board. There's a couple of things that sort of strike me. I think first, what you mentioned, Liz, there can be different levels of understanding across the organization and differing needs of understanding, right? I mean, not everybody needs to understand every single detail. Like, UIDs, for example, and I'm sure that, there are some folks in regulatory who don't really care that much, but how, we're organizing their record types, they probably do. What I think we should be thinking about as a reference model is how can we provide support to the industry through things like train the trainer, for example. I think that, we can provide training, of course, but I think it's always good to have training given in the context of your organization. So if we can train trainers within each organization, and they can then adapt that training and then provide training locally to their various different stakeholders, that makes maybe more sense for their organization. And I'm also thinking around change management. Maybe we need to have things like a kind of like a change management toolkit where we can provide materials to organizations that, again, they can adapt. So that they can get that message across and kind of support them in their change journey and their sort of onboarding journey, rather than trying to sort of train everybody. I think that's what we should think.
I'm sorry, Paul.
No, that's it.
Well, I was just going to say, CDISC, worth looking at. We have Lisa Mulcahy, who is on our program team and is also on the training team along with Diane Nickham, and really thinking about CDISC community. We will begin to start rolling out just some training around this. We're not going to wait until it's V4. As we are making decisions and coming up with a group of, okay, this is ready for companies to start to implement. And I think one thing you can start doing pretty soon, as soon as possible, is start thinking about record groups and record types, and just kind of switching. When you're talking about an artifact, talk about a record group, and when you're talking about a subartifact, talk about a record type. While the names may change, the spirit won't change. And so I think that you're safe to just starting within your community to start to use those words. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. A quick question came in that I want to address, and that's like, what's the plan for making this a standard and talking to the regulators? And I think, Paul, I know you've been having a lot of conversations with the regulators. I'm starting to. Paul, can you just talk briefly about the goal here with that?
Yeah, so we obviously, one of our objectives is to gain recognition from the regulators as being the standard to be used to organize TMF content for clinical trials. So that's really part of our key objectives. And so we've already started to reach out and speak to different inspectors. We're also leveraging our status as being part of CDISC to open doors for us. So, for example, we've been invited to EMA IWG group in Amsterdam in November, I believe it is, to discuss essential records, for example, as part of CDISC. And so we're starting to get a seat at the table, and that's really important because for us, the regulators have always been interested in what we do, but we've never ever been really endorsed. And I think that if we can get that endorsement, it's going to change things significantly, and it's going to be so much more clear cut. So I think we're working hard on this, and I think being part of CDISC and becoming a formal standard are key to having those dialogues as as you know, the inspectors and the regulatory agencies really are key stakeholders. I mean, they're the consumers of what we're producing, right? Or one of the consumers anyway. And so it is important that we have that dialogue, and so we're getting there.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. So we have it looks like we have a minute left. So I'll just do a quick round robin here. When you think about V4, what's maybe one or two words that come to your mind about what V4 is going to make better for the future? So Paul's always good at thinking on his feet. So Paul, what are one or two words that you might think about that that you think about with V4?
Better story.
Nice. I like it. How about you, Steph?
I think inspection steady and ready.
Nice. Liz?
I would just go with less questions, more answers.
I think a team effort. It's really been a team effort. It's been amazing how many different people from how many different organizations have come together to really embrace this effort. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to you guys. It was fun working on this. It's always fun interacting and talking about our greatest passion, right? Trial Master File. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna. That was amazing. And it's up to me now to sort of end the session. But before I do that, I do need to speak about the next session, and that's going to be tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon for those of you in Europe, where we'll have Joanne Malia from Regeneron, who will be giving us the lowdown on ICH E6L3 and what it means for the TMF landscape. So I think it's going to be a very interesting talk. Lots of very good information that please take away in that talk as well. So do please join that session. And with that, I believe it's now time for you to head to the lounge for the networking break, the last networking break of the day. Maybe have your lunch, with your colleagues in that virtual lounge. So Liz, Steph, Donna, thank you for an amazing session. I always love having these discussions because there's so much exciting stuff going on. And really looking forward to our journey moving forward. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.